So the first thing you'll want to do when you're about to do your crochet chain embroidery is to mark out where your pattern is going to be. Because this pattern doesn't follow exact lines of stitches and rows, you have to kind of mark the boundaries. So you can do that with a running stitch if you wanted to actually just use yarn and do a running stitch to sort of surround the area. You can use locking stitch markers, or in this case I'm just going to put some pins in here. So you just want to pick a spot to start if your pattern doesn't specify. So I'm going to say that this spot right here is going to be this pair of stitches here. So I know that I have to count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. About halfway through the 11th, that's where the top will go. So I count here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Halfway through the 11th. So this is the top of my flower. Now I'm also going to count it out side to side. So if I'm starting here, then this petal over here, which is the furthest to the right, will be 1, 2, 3, and a little over 3 beyond the stitch. So 1, 2, 3. This is about where the flower will end. And also counting from here, the other side is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 stitches over. So counting from here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So now I've blocked out about where the flower is going to go. Now within those boundaries, I can either make it up as I go, or actually use another running stitch to kind of plot out where that would go. Or if you want, if you're using a suitably dark colored yarn to do the embroidery, or contrasting enough, then you can actually use a disappearing ink pen and kind of trace out where the design will go. And the reason why contrast is important is that if for some reason there's a little bit of that ink line showing, it won't show as much if the yarn itself contrasts well with the background. So now I'm going to attach my yarn and start crocheting. So the first stitch doing this is actually the hardest one, because you have to kind of get used to the feeling of it. In this case, I'm actually going to add a stem to this flower just to show you what it looks like when you work the crochet chain overstitching in a straight line. It actually looks just like the knitted stitch. So you want to hold the yarn behind your work, and you don't need to actually cut off any yarn. You can just leave the ball whole or have whatever quantity you'd like, because you'll be working directly off the ball. So you hold the yarn behind your work, and I'm just going to pick a stitch here to go through. So you push your crochet hook through, and the crochet hook needs to be appropriate for the size of the yarn you're using for the embroidery, otherwise you're going to have trouble bringing it through. You just wrap the yarn around the hook and pull it through to the front. Now you want to leave this stitch pretty small, because that's where you're going to start your next stitch. So still holding the yarn behind your work, you move up one stitch, put the crochet hook back through, pick up another loop of yarn, and bring it through. And you basically continue doing this. You could skip stitches and make longer crochet chain stitches, so do something like that. You could make them shorter, but in this case I'm just following exactly where the stitches are. Now this is a way that if you needed to duplicate stitch a straight line, this is a very fast way of doing it. But it'll look a little different on the back. You're going to get sort of what looks like a little sewn line on the back. So it's slightly different than duplicate stitching. This is also something that you can use to secure the edges of a steek, because this will form essentially a barrier beyond which the cut edges of the steek really won't fray. Alright, so I'm just about getting up to where my flower will start. So So now, instead of going in a straight line, I need to turn. In this case, I'm going to turn and head around this bottom left petal here. So if it helps you to turn your work, you can do so and keep the crochet hook moving in the same direction that you're used to using. So I'm basically just going to push the crochet hook through where I think the next stitch needs to go. It doesn't have to follow or line up with anything. And essentially you just continue doing that, which is why, you know, if you did want to mark out where your chain will go, that might actually help if you want better visualization of where you're going to put your crochet hook next. Now you want to try to keep your stitches even, unless you're going for a more rustic look, because it will blend into the knitted fabric very well if they're even. So in this case, because I'm going row-wise, I just go from one row to the next, but I can move up and down. Now while you're getting used to this, it might be good just to kind of go slowly, just so you can get the feel for it, to make sure that you are using proper tension. Because as you can see here, this is fairly loose, but this will tend to restrict the movement of the knitted fabric more so than would duplicate stitching or some other embroidery methods. So you do want to be careful and use this method only where you know that the overall stretch of the fabric in that area is not as important. So you're not going to want to use this on a sock where you're going to have your foot going through and it might not be able to, because this does tend to get pretty tight. So when you're about to finish your crochet chain motif, you want to break your yarn and leave a short tail. And in this case, I've pulled my last stitch right up to here, so I won't need to do another stitch over the top. So I'm just going to pull the tail through that stitch. From the bottom, from the underside, I'm going to poke the crochet hook through this next stitch here and pull the tail back down through. Now I have a cute little flower. So crochet chain embroidery is pretty useful if you want to just do little motifs or put a little pop of color somewhere. You can use it to highlight different details in a colorwork garment. You can use it to add a little bit of depth to colorwork designs, or you can simply use it as a tool to help you cut steeks. But either way, it's a fun, fast, and relatively simple way of adding color to your projects.